I'm going to show you how to make wedges that we might use in mortise and tenon joints. What we need to do is make consistent size wedges, and for that the best way of doing it is with a jig. I could just mark out the wedges by hand and cut them individually, either with a tenon saw or on the bandsaw. But making the jig again makes them all the same size. This is a little foxtail wedged mortise and tenon. It's an incredibly strong joint, but if you don't get the wedges the right size, it fails. And you've only got one chance of gluing this up, and it's when you glue this up, the wedges push in. If the wedges are too fat, you won't close the joint up. If the wedges are too thin, it won't do what it should do. The idea is as it goes in, the wedges push in and it turns the tenon more into a dovetail. It means it's physically incredibly strong. Wedges in tenons have been used for hundreds of years, particularly in joinery. This oak window that I've made is going to be subject to sunshine, rain and all the elements throughout the day or throughout the year. Traditionally, glues wouldn't have lasted that long, they would probably fail, but having the tenons coming through and wedging them makes them that much stronger. We also use wedge tenons in furniture, both for strength but also for aesthetics. It certainly came very much back into fashion 100 years ago with the arts and crafts movement, so we will occasionally use it in our furniture as well. I've got some timber. This was originally a longer board. I've got it planed and thicknessed to what would be the correct thickness for our tenon. I've got it so it's a fairly wide board. It's a 4-inch wide board, and I want grain that's quite straight. If we have really wild grain, it'll make very weak wedges and they will fail during your gluing up. What I'm going to do is set the bandsaw up to a set width. I'm going to cut this bit of ash through so it's to the width that the bandsaw is set up to. I'm going to do a cut into this piece of MDF to create a false bed, zero clearance. What we don't want to happen is every time we cut a wedge or every third wedge we cut, they disappear into the throat, because either I'm going to have to turn the bandsaw off and remove them, which is going to be very non-productive, or the wedge will get sucked down through the bandsaw, ruin my guides, get caught between the blade and the wheel, all of which are going to cause me problems for the quality of my bandsaw and can ruin my blade. So zero clearance so the wedges can't fall in. The ash has been cut to the right width. Place on the piece of timber that's making the wedges so it's sort of the correct angle, and mark it around with a pencil. Then that piece is going to be cut out on the bandsaw to form the right size socket for our piece of timber to sit into that's going to form our wedges. When you are cutting the wedges, ensure that you cut a piece and flip the timber over and flip it again for each cut. If we do this, that means the wedges will stay nice and centered on the grain. They look a very consistent thickness, which is really important if we're going to make a feature out of a joint. If we drive a pair of wedges into a tenon and we're going to make it as a show joint, we need to make sure those wedges look exactly the same thickness. If one drives in more than the other, and you then cut them off and plane them and they look different sizes, it won't make a really nice feature out of that joint. It'll just make it look poorly made. It'll still be incredibly strong, but we want to make it look as neat as it is strong if we can.